My dad slapped me across the face on his birthday. "What kind of junk did you give me?" he shouted. I left with tears in my eyes. I ran away from home at night. I was pushed into a car and kidnapped. The man inside said, "Hello, dear. I am your biological father." His hand was still in the air when the gift box slipped from my fingers. "What kind of junk did you give me?" he shouted. The words were louder than the slap. For a moment, I didn't move. Not because it didn't hurt, but because something inside me was trying to understand the mathematics of humiliation. I now understand why pain is simple, but humiliation is not. Humiliation is layered. It has witnesses. It has memory. And that night, the entire room was watching. Family, friends, business partners. My stepmother stood beside the cake, like a queen hosting a royal dinner. And my father, Daniel O'Neil, a man people called brilliant, disciplined, successful. A man who believed emotions were weaknesses, especially in his daughter. The side of my face burned. But what I remember most is the sound of someone clearing their throat across the table. That small, uncomfortable sound people make when something ugly happens and they don't want to be involved. I bent slowly and picked up the box. The ribbon had come undone. Inside it was a vintage watch. Nothing flashy, just old, precise, quiet. Exactly the kind of thing my father used to admire. Back when I was younger. Back when he still spoke to me like I mattered. I thought, I started. Stopped. Because explanations are a form of begging. And I learned a long time ago that begging never changes the verdict. My stepmother, Clara, laughed softly. Not loud enough to be rude, just loud enough to be heard. "Oh, Daniel," she said, waving her hand dismissively. She probably bought it from one of those street markets. A few people chuckled politely, the kind of laugh that floats around a room looking for approval. My father didn't laugh. He simply dropped the watch back into the box, like it was contaminated. "You should learn standards," he said. Then he turned away, just like that. Conversation resumed. Wine glasses clinked again. The cake candles were relit. And I stood there, invisible in my own father's house. Every second feels like a slow photograph developing in your mind. I remember the chandelier light reflecting off the polished table. The smell of buttercream frosting. The way Clara leaned closer to my father, whispering something that made him smile again. Remember thinking something very clear. You will regret this. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but someday. Because humiliation is a seed, and seeds grow. I walked out quietly. No dramatic exit, just soft footsteps down the marble hallway. My room was upstairs, but I didn't go there. Instead, I stepped outside. The night air was cooler than I expected. My hands were shaking, though I wasn't crying yet. I walked past the garden lights, past the tall iron gate, and only when the house was far behind me did the tears finally come. I walked for a long time, streetlights humming above me. The city seemed quieter than usual when I realized something strange. A car had been following me. Black sedan. Engine barely audible. At first I thought it was just a coincidence. Then the car slowed. The passenger door opened. And before my brain could finish processing the situation, someone stepped out. A tall man. He grabbed my arm. "Hey." I didn't even finish the word. A cloth pressed against my mouth. My vision blurred. The last thing I remember seeing was the open car door. Then, darkness. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was silence, like a room designed to hold secrets. I was sitting in a leather chair. My hands weren't tied. Strange. The room was dim, lit by a single lamp on a wooden desk. Bookshelves lined the walls. Real books. Hundreds of them. They looked old and expensive. Whoever owned this place valued knowledge, or the appearance of it. My head still hurts. I tried to stand. "Careful." The voice came from across the room. A calm male voice. I froze. A man stepped forward into the light, mid-50s maybe. Gray at the temples, sharp eyes. The kind of man who studies people the way surgeons study anatomy. He wasn't smiling, but he didn't look threatening either. which somehow felt worse. Where am I? Voice sounded steadier than I expected. He seemed impressed. Good, he said quietly. You woke up faster than I predicted. I looked around again. No windows. One door behind him. Whoever this man was, he had planned this. You kidnapped me, I said. He tilted his head slightly. Technically, yes. Why? He studied my face for a long moment, almost like he was searching for something familiar. Then he exhaled slowly. Well, he said, this part is always difficult. Something in his tone made the room feel smaller. Your name is Elena O'Neil, he continued. 24 years old. Top of your class in economics. Quiet reputation for solving problems no one else notices. How do you know that? He ignored the question. Your father is Daniel O'Neil, he said. The name hung between us. Then he walked closer, not in a threatening way. Close enough now that I could see the small scar near his eyebrow. Close enough that I noticed something strange in his face. A resemblance. Not too obvious, but it's there. In the jawline, the eyes, the way he stood. Hell, dear, he said softly. I am your biological father. For a moment, I honestly thought I misheard him. Because some sentences are so absurd. The brain rejects them automatically. You're lying, I said. Argue. Instead, he opened a folder on the desk. Inside were documents, photographs, hospital records, DNA test results. He turned the pages slowly, giving me time to see each one. My name. His name. Numbers that didn't lie. My chest tightened. No, I whispered. Daniel raised you, the man said calmly. But biologically, you belong to me. My mind started assembling pieces. Fragments of childhood memories. Arguments between my parents. The way my father sometimes looked at me, like I was an unsolved equation. What is this? I asked quietly. Why tell me now? He leaned against the desk. Carefully. Because, he said, tonight was the moment I was waiting for. I stared at him. What moment? He smiled slightly. The moment Daniel O'Neil proved he never deserved you. My throat tightened. You watched that? Of course. You were there? I asked. In a way. He gestured toward the folder again. You see, Elena, I've been observing your life for a long time. Why? I demanded. His expression didn't change. Because I needed to know something. What? He stepped closer. Close enough now that his voice dropped slightly. I needed to know if you were my daughter. A long silence followed. Quietly. And tonight? You proved it. I felt something strange inside me then. Not fear. Not anger. Something colder. Explain, I said. He studied me, for a moment. Then he nodded. Daniel and I used to be partners, he began, many years ago. His eyes darkened slightly. I built the company he now calls his empire. And he stole it. The room felt heavier. He also stole something else, the man said. What? His gaze locked onto mine. Your mother. The words sat there quietly, like a loaded weapon on a table. Daniel destroyed my life, he continued calmly. My future. I felt the pieces moving now, slowly, like gears beginning to turn. And you, I said carefully, you kidnapped me for revenge? He shook his head. No. Then he smiled slightly. The kind of smile that appears when someone reveals the final move in a chess game. I brought you here, he said, because you are the only person intelligent enough to help me destroy him. The room went silent again. My mind replayed the scene from earlier. The slap. The laughter, the watch on the floor. Clara's voice. Daniel turned away like I was nothing. And suddenly, something settled inside me. Sharp. You've been watching me for years, I said slowly. Yes. Waiting for the moment he pushed me too far. Yes. I leaned back in the chair, thinking, calculating. My father, the man who raised me, had humiliated me in front of a room full of people. And now another man, possibly my real father, was offering me a front-row seat to his downfall. I wiped the last tear from my cheek. Then I looked up. "All right," I said calmly. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "All right, what?" I met his gaze without blinking. "Tell me everything." A slow smile spread across his face, and in that moment, neither of us knew something important yet. Believed he had just slapped his daughter. What he had really done was to start a war. I've learned that revenge is not about anger. Anger is loud. Anger is clumsy. Revenge, real revenge, is quiet. It waits. It studies the room. It lets the arrogant man keep talking, because arrogant men always reveal more than they should. That night, in the dim library of the man who claimed to be my biological father, I sat very still, listening, thinking. Across from me, he poured 2 glasses of water. A strange detail, but details matter. People who plan revenge rarely drink when they explain it. "My name is Victor Hale," he said. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it suggested it should. He slid a folder across the desk. Documents, contracts, photos, emails printed carefully and organized by date. I flipped through them slowly. Daniel O'Neil's signature appeared again and again. Partnership agreements, investment structures. Then, something interesting. A sudden transfer of ownership. Victor's company, suddenly no longer his. And just like that, Victor said calmly, Daniel became the sole owner. I studied the dates. 25 years ago. "That's illegal," I said. Victor smiled faintly. "Of course it was." "Then why didn't you fight it?" "I did." He leaned back slightly. But Daniel was always better at one thing. "What?" "Preparation." I kept turning pages. Legal disputes. Court filings. Every single one, dismissed. Witnesses changed their statements, Victor said quietly. Evidence disappeared. He paused. "Your father is very good at erasing problems." I stopped at a photograph. My mother. Young, smiling, standing beside Victor. Not Daniel. Victor noticed my reaction. "Yes," he said softly. "She loved me once." I felt a strange pressure in my chest. Not sadness. Not yet. Just confusion rearranging itself. "What happened?" I asked. Slowly. "Daniel happened." The room felt colder. "He convinced her I betrayed her," Victor said. "Convinced the courts I committed fraud." He tapped the folder. "Then he took everything." His eyes met mine. "And when your mother discovered she was pregnant..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Daniel claimed you as his," Victor said. And she believed the story he told. A quiet silence filled the room. Then I asked the question that mattered. "Why tell me now?" Victor walked to the windowless wall and rested his hand on the shelf. "Because Daniel is vulnerable." That word caught my attention. "Explain." "Me. Your father's company is preparing for a massive international merger." I knew about that. Everyone in the business press did. "If that deal closes," Victor continued, "Daniel becomes untouchable. And if it doesn't?" Victor's smile was small, but precise. "His empire collapses." Now my interest has sharpened. "What do you need from me?" Victor studied me carefully before answering. "Access." "To what?" "To him." I let that sit for a moment. "You want me to spy on my father?" Victor tilted his head slightly. "Is he still your father?" That question hung there. Heavy. I thought about the slap. The laughter. "Watch on the floor." Then I answered honestly. "He raised me." Victor nodded. "Fair." Then he said something else. "But he never respected you." I didn't respond. Because he wasn't wrong. Instead, I asked the real question. "What happens if we succeed?" Victor walked slowly back to the desk. "Daniel is exposed." "For what?" "Fraud. Corporate theft. Financial manipulation." He paused. "And a few crimes even he forgot about." I leaned back in the chair. Processing. Calculating. "You've been planning this for years," I said. "Yes. But you never acted." Victor nodded. Because revenge without precision is suicide. Then he looked directly at me. But with you? He left the sentence unfinished. I finished it for him. You finally have a way inside. Victor didn't deny it. Silence settled between us again. Finally, I stood up. Take me home, I said. Victor blinked. You're not interested? I picked up the folder. Interested. I closed it carefully. Into P. But revenge requires patience. Victor's eyes sharpened. Daniel, eyes sharpened. I met his gaze calmly. Daniel believes he humiliated me. Yes. Daniel acknowledges he believes I ran away in shame. Victor nodded slowly. That belief is useful. Drive. Insurance, he said. What's on it? Evidence Daniel buried. I slipped it into my pocket. Then I stepped out of the car. The house looked peaceful in the early light, like nothing had happened. Inside, the party decorations were still scattered around. Empty glasses, half-melted candles, and the watch box still sitting on the table. I picked it up. The watch inside ticked softly. Perfectly. Precise. Just like revenge should be. Footsteps sounded behind me. Where were you? Clara, still in her silk robe. Her voice carried irritation, not concern. I turned slowly. Out. She crossed her arms. You embarrassed your father last night. I almost smiled. Interesting. So the slap was my fault? Clara rolled her eyes. You know how Daniel is. Yes, I did. That's why the next part would work. Daniel entered the room a moment later. His tie was already on. Business as usual. He barely looked at me. Don't disappear like that again, he said flatly. No apology. Of course not. I placed the watch box in front of him. You should keep it, I said. He frowned slightly. I told you. It's authentic. He opened the box. Watch? Recognition flickered there. That's a 1968 Swiss original, he said slowly. Yes. A small silence followed. Then he cleared his throat. You shouldn't waste money like that. Ah, there it was. No apology. Just adjustment. I nodded politely. Then I said the sentence that changed everything. I'd like to start working at the company. Daniel looked surprised. Why? I met his gaze calmly. I think it's time I learned how things really work. Clara laughed softly. Oh, please. But Daniel raised a hand. He was thinking now. Calculating. You studied economics, he said. Yes. And finance. Yes. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Fine. Clara looked shocked. Daniel, she's family, he said. And just like that, the door opened. 3 weeks later, I was inside the company, quietly observing, quietly collecting information. People underestimated me constantly. Assistant, junior analyst, the boss's daughter, invisible, perfect. Every day I copied files, financial models, emails, contracts. The deeper I looked, the uglier it became. Accounts. Offshore transfers. Victor had been telling the truth. Daniel's empire wasn't just ambitious, it was fragile. Built on lies. Then one afternoon, I found it. The document. Buried deep inside an encrypted folder. Proof that Daniel had manipulated the merger valuation. Billions, built on falsified numbers. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I saved the file. That evening, I met Victor again. We sat across from each other in the same dim room. I placed the flash drive on the desk. Victor didn't touch it immediately. You're certain? Yes. He finally picked it up. His hands were steady. But his eyes were alive. Tomorrow, he said quietly, the board meets. I nodded. Yes. Victor studied me carefully. You're very calm. I thought about that. Then I said something honest. I learned from Daniel. The board meeting the next morning was beautiful. 20 executives, lawyers, investors. Daniel standing confidently at the head of the table, explaining the merger, projecting success. PowerPoint slides glowing behind him. Then the doors opened. Regulators walked in. Investigators. And Victor. The room froze. Daniel's expression shifted, slowly. What is this? He asked. Victor placed the flash drive on the table. Justice. The investigators began speaking. Fraud. Market manipulation. Financial crimes. Each word landed like a hammer. Daniel looked around the room. Searching. Calculating. Finally, his eyes found me. I was sitting quietly in the corner. Watching. Understanding dawned slowly on his face. You, he whispered. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I simply met his gaze. And in that moment, he realized something. The daughter he humiliated had been standing inside his empire the entire time, collecting the evidence that destroyed it. The room was filled with chaos. Lawyers arguing, phones ringing, investigators reading charges. Daniel stood frozen. Then the handcuffs came out. As they led him past me, he stopped. Why? He asked quietly. I tilted my head slightly. Then I answered. You slapped me over a gift. He stared at me. I added softly. But the real problem wasn't the slap. A small pause. It was that you believed I was powerless. He said nothing. Because now, he understood. Weeks later, the news headlines were everywhere. Corporate giant, exposed in financial scandal. Daniel O'Neil's empire collapsed within days. Victor visited me one last time. Did well, he said. Better than I expected. I looked at him calmly. Revenge was your plan, I said. But execution. I let the sentence trail off. Victor smiled slightly. Yes? Then he asked something interesting. What will you do now? I thought about it for a moment. Then I answered honestly. Build something better. Victor nodded. And as he walked toward the door, he paused. One question, he said. I looked up. Did you ever actually buy that watch for Daniel? I smiled slightly. Of course. Victor frowned. Why? I glanced at the quiet ticking watch on the table. Then I said the final truth. Because I knew exactly how he would react. Me for a moment. Then he laughed softly. And somewhere, far away, Daniel O'Neil finally understood something. The daughter he thought was weak had been planning the ending since the moment his hand touched her face.